Good morning and welcome to our next session this morning. This is going to be a session on allergens and avoidance of contamination and recall. It's a very exciting opportunity for us as an industry to learn more about how allergen incidents can occur and how to prevent them from occurring. So I just want to remind us all that food allergy is one of the most common serious food safety concerns, and it should not be dismissed as fussy eating. So I just want us all to get on the same page with this one. Food allergens are a serious hazard that need to be managed really competently. And also the uniqueness of allergens is that very low amounts of food allergens can actually provoke serious adverse reactions on just one occasion of eating. So it's a little bit like imagining that you've got glass in a product. A piece of glass is going to cause a problem with 1 teaspoonful, 1 mouthful, like an allergen would. This is not like perhaps other chemical contaminants or microbiology. And we've got a really unique industry learning opportunity today to talk about food allergens. So I want to thank our panel members very much for coming and agreeing to join live discussion and live questions, which is always interesting. But also I particularly want to thank FGS for coming, because sharing issues and incidents and discussing the details in the background and why something occurred, and also particularly to thank Tina for coming from Food Standards Agency, because without that context of an incident, you don't always know, when you just see an alert, what's gone on behind to then reapply it into your business. And that's very important, and that's our goal today. And one of the other goals that I'd really like everyone to take away and to perhaps ask questions about that is just a reminder: if you're unaware of a hazard relevant to the specific foods that you are handling and foods that you are producing, then you won't be able to put competent control measures in place. So if your hazard analysis at the very beginning doesn't include that hazard, none of your risk management's actually going to cover it, is it? Because you didn't include it from the start of your thinking. You didn't include it in your list of potentials that may need to be managed. So it's just really key for everyone to think about it in that way, and to know, is that hazard relevant to your type of ingredient, the way you handle it, the way you buy it, the place you buy it from, how you're going to process it, and that goes for all types of hazards. So I just want to introduce Jatin. He's going to speak to us in a moment. Jatin's the head of operations at FGS Ingredients, with over 2 decades of experience in the food industry. And he's got an accountancy background, but also obviously understands the operations of his business. Tina is head of incidents at Food Standards Agency, joined the civil service in 1999, and has worked in the multiple roles: meat inspector, enforcement, project management. She has been head of incidents at FSA since 2017 and leads on the operational delivery for management of foodborne disease and malicious tampering. And I love what you said actually in your bios, is food safety is who I am, not just what I do. I love that. That is what we need. And then next to Tina we have Jill. Jill and I have got a very similar background. Jill's the principal consultant at RQA Group with over 20 years experience in manufacturing, specialist laboratory and retail technical roles, mainly food, but smatterings of non-food and pharmaceuticals as well, and spent a number of years working in every single food category that exists, and has specialist experience in how you manage and execute a recall really well. So I would listen out for what Jill's got to say. And then next to Jill, last but not least, is Ian Thomas, who is a specialist food lawyer, a barrister in England and Wales, but also a solicitor in the Republic of Ireland. And his work includes food safety and hygiene, food information, supplements, claims, and crisis management. He is ranked in Chambers and Partners UK Bar Guide, which he's going to start and blush now. So he's highly adept at providing regulatory compliance advice as well as representing clients in court. And Ian is also a visiting professor at Ulster University, an elected fellow of the Society of Food Hygiene and Technology, and a member of the European Food Law Association and its country counterpart in Ireland as well. Author of a very useful practical guide to food law in the UK. I'm sure he'll do signings if anyone's brought their copy. And my background is I'm a biochemist and a toxicologist. I've worked in the food industry for 35 years in risk management, recalls, hazard analysis, and as my husband says, you don't want to see me coming with a high vis and a clipboard towards you, because it means I'm about to inspect you to death and really find out the root cause of what's going on to help people solve things and put good solutions in place that means it won't happen again. So again, I've got kind of risk prevention running through me like a stick of rock as well. So with no further ado, I'd like to invite Jatin to give us a keynote overview of this particular case study of peanut in mustard, and then we will take questions from the floor as soon as Jatin has shared his background and information. Thanks, Jatin.
Hello everyone. Thank you for allowing me to share this story with you guys today. My name is Jatin Patel and I'm Head of Operations at FGS Ingredients, a company that has proudly served customers for the last 5 decades. And today I'm going to talk about the mustard contamination issue. I'm here to talk about something that goes beyond numbers, protocols or business strategies. I'm here to talk about people and about their safety, their trust, and the responsibility we carry as food industry professionals to protect both. FGS Ingredients, established in Leicester in 1974, we're a family-owned business started by my grandfather, and now we're into the 3rd generation of leadership. We have grown to be a principal ingredient supplier, and we pride ourselves on our service, quality, and the wealth of knowledge allowing us to cater for all clients' needs. I was at the airport coming back to London when I was informed about the complaint regarding the possible contamination. At the time, we immediately initiated traceability and testing to be carried out on the product. 4 samples were drawn and sent for testing. Our initial reaction was of shock and disbelief, as it was never a known issue. We routinely at FGS carry out risk assessments of all our products, and it's never known issue by us or anyone else, and we're also regularly checking RAS alerts and horizon scanning as well. The next day I came in early to catch up on emails and the complaint when the unannounced auditor, BRC auditor, showed up for their annual audit. And without a technical manager who had left the week before to join a company closer to home. When we received the results back, 3 samples tested negative and 1 tested positive. Low positive, but still a positive. We informed the BRC auditor on site of these results, as well as the EHO and FSA of our findings, and based on the results we were advised and decided to initiate a recall based on precautionary grounds. As we still didn't know where the contamination was coming from, we decided to get a third-party testing carried out of our factory and the staff. Was it coming from our factory? No, the results were negative. By now, we had informed the supplier of the ongoing issue. He, like us, was in shock and disbelief. GT Agro in India, who is a BRC accredited site and a nut-free site like us, we had also instructed him to get third-party swabbing done of his factory, which had also come back negative. At the same time, whilst the recall was going on, to give customer assurances and confidence, we had now started testing on all products we were supplying to our customers. And also all other batches of mustard we had on site from India. These batches initially tested negative as well. But as our testing grew, we saw that some of the mustards we were testing were negative as well as positive. With the help of the EHO and the FSA, we realized that these batches of mustard had hot spots, which meant there was no consistency in the tests we were carrying out. These batches were not just from one supplier. We were seeing it from a number of suppliers. Therefore, after advice from the EHO and FSA, and on the grounds of abundance of precaution, we withdrew all mustard and any blends containing mustard going back 2 years, even though we had test results showing negative results on certain batches. As the contamination wasn't from our factory or our suppliers, our investigation took us back to the farms. We realized that these farms were growing peanut in nearby proximity to the mustard, as well as using second-hand bags to fill the crop when harvested. We realized at this point that there was a possible cross-contamination happening at farm level, which has now been confirmed by the Indian government and the FSA being the source of the cross-contamination. Not all the recalls, were by FGS. Most were initiated by our customers or our customers of customers, but they were down as FGS on the alerts. The biggest question we have tried to answer since the incident is how do we protect ourselves and our customers from the unknown? We and everyone in the industry can protect itself against known risks, but impossible when no one else knew this risk existed. We at FGS have started to test all ingredients for peanut and every other allergen. We've implemented tests with our suppliers to test the product before dispatch, and we test internally on arrival. We have also initiated PAL statements where we feel there is a risk which has been very unpopular in the industry and has meant we've lost customers as well. Regular factory and staff swabs are being undertaken as well. And at the same time, we are reassessing all suppliers in more depth, which is still ongoing. The impact it had on us as a business was immense. We have a recall policy which was followed at the time. We regularly carry out mock product recalls to test the process, but we realize practice and reality are two very different things. How do you practice the wider pressure and levels of stress it creates in the business? Whilst the recall and withdrawal was ongoing, the knock-on effects it created was immense and very difficult to deal with. Some of the issues we dealt with. We had a winding up petition on us which was withdrawn within 2 hours. What we didn't realise was for 24 to 48 hours your credit rating goes to zero. As our credit rating went to zero, most of our suppliers thought because of the recall withdrawal, we were liquidating or closing down. We were asked to clear all balances the following day, before midday, and we were put on pro forma for the next 4 to 5 months. Banks were notified by the insurance company and started their own due diligence processes, which restricted some of our use. We had professional consultants showing up at our family home unannounced to advise us, which caused huge amounts of stress for the whole family. We also had daily requests of about 30 traceabilities from the EHO as well as customers who were rightly concerned and wanted sureties, which was impossible for us to do in one day, along with approximately 800 emails to answer in the day, and everyone wanting answers immediately. Everyone at FGS were working 16, 17-hour days, 6 to 7 days a week for about 3 months. Just to get back to everyone and get questions answered for the EHO as well as all our customers. That created its own pressure for us within the business. As I'm here today, I'm reminded of the responsibility we hold as food industry professionals. We are responsible to nourish, to sustain, and to protect. Our story is a testament to the fact that no study or process is 100% secure. Thank you.
Thank you, Jatin. That's a very personal story, and I really just want a round of applause to recognise that this is a very vulnerable position to sit in, and to recognise that actually, that for the grace of God go most businesses, and there'll be people sat in this audience today who've been through recall, and it's a very uncomfortable situation to be in. And I just want to say thank you for that. And you raised lots of very important points in that summary, and a lot of mention of working closely with EHO and FSA. So Tina, could I ask you to give a sort of a short reflection of FSA's role in this kind of an incident, and how you would want food business operators to engage with your experience and your advice, and to use your advice to then work whether something's a company-specific issue or is it actually an industry-wide issue, and where are those blurring boundaries? Perhaps if you could comment on that, please.
Yeah, of course. So at the start of any incident, like the one facing FGS included, that actually your end question there is the start question for us. Is it an isolated issue? Is it caused at the factory? Is it along the supply chain, or might it be an industry-wide incident? And with a hazard as serious as allergies, but in particular peanut, as you touched on at the beginning, one exposure could lead to a fatality. And then having that positive food safety culture to really try and understand what's gone wrong, but at what point it's gone wrong. The easy automatic responses that we commonly see is to test everything to death and to be hanging your life of your business on those results. But it would be far more useful to be confidently able to virtually walk through your supply chain from the farm until the end, and that desktop exercise, really sitting down and thinking along the supply chain with your suppliers and trade associations where you're members, what could have gone wrong, what might have gone wrong. So we hear here of some examples of cross-contaminations at the field. The crux of that is the product specifications. So in this particular case, the question had been asked, have you assessed the peanut contamination? And the answer was provided as no. But that providing answer to no, it's not been assessed, is not the same as it doesn't pose a risk. So the risk in any question is, especially in a closed question, you get a yes and no answer. So this is not limited to this business, and definitely not limited to allergy-related incidents. It's just that need to understand your whole supply chain and make sure you're asking the right questions along that supply chain, so you've got supply chain assurance, not ingredient assurance, nor business assurance. And of course, it's true to say FGS did act responsibly. Other business would have dug their heads in, hidden, put more effort into hiding the problem than investigating the problem. And out of that came industry-wide learning. So we've since had a similar problem with peanut contamination of garlic, but it's a minuscule problem in comparison. Why is that? And that's because everybody is aware for the last 10 years that when you're in garlic manufacture, peanut is an allergen to be concerned with. In mustard production, it was a surprise to the global experts. This wasn't on their radar. And back to your point about HACCP, once you understand and identify a HACCP, you can manage that hazard and make sure that you make checks and balances and take risk-based decisions along that supply chain. What might be very high risk at the beginning might be below limit of detection at the end, but it's it's a hazard you've identified, you can manage and control it. In this situation, it was a surprise to everybody. I spoke to no end of trade associations, but now, of course, the problem is outed. It means it's being looked for. I expect there will be a rise in issues, and I expect there will be the need for quite industry-wide use of precautionary allergen labelling in the short term, and that comes with its own issue in limiting food availability for those who are sensitive and extremely sensitive. But consumer focus, it's got to be consumer safety first. So really welcome the fact of sharing your insights, because others can learn from them. I deal with 40 to 50 incidents a week, and you're not alone in your findings or approach, trust me.
Thank you, Tina, that's really helpful. So Jill, there's a lot of conversation there about getting your hazard analysis right and doing that walking down the supply chain, which I know you've got a lot of experience in. What kind of things should people be asking in their specifications of their supplier, and how can they go about verifying it? I know you were very involved in this particular incident, but it's not your first rodeo, is it?
No, that's true. First of all, I want to start off by, so I work very closely with Jatin and the guys at FGS during this incident as a supporting consultant, and it was really heartbreaking to see the family have to go through what they went through, but also heartwarming to see a really responsible business face into something with such gusto and such openness. And it's something that I would like to see more of in the food industry. But yeah, absolutely. So I think some of the things we can take for learnings that we worked through at FGS was, and just touching back on what Tina opened with there, was I turned up to give some support, and initially it was just test results everywhere. And there's this degree of reliance on lab analysis, reliance on certification, whether that be GFSI certification or laboratory certification. These all have their place in the due diligence framework and bubble. However, they are not the golden panacea that we all too often get stuck in the rut and think we're safe. And Jatin, I think you won't mind me saying that you were kind of in that place and were surprised and taken by from left field as to how this could have then happened. So in answer to the question, it's all about knowing the supply chain, and that's a really easy thing to say with words, but actually getting into the nitty-gritty of it is more difficult, especially for a smaller business. But it really is about mapping out. So the first thing we did together when I turned up at FGS was to get a big sheet of white paper and coloured pencils, and we drew everything out, old school style, and really worked out where things were happening, had the full visualisation of that, so that we can then get back down to crossing out one by one the potential risk factors and potential avenues for further investigation. Luckily, the guys have got good relations in country with suppliers out there and the distributors, so we had a little bit more of ability to communicate with some of the Indian manufacturers and get some insights into the farming, but it's very difficult to contact the authorities. And I think part of this is about trying, as an industry, to get better at sharing information, because as we've spoken about, and we certainly trawl through data to try and find, was there any insight that we've missed? Was there something where we could have thought where there's a risk with mustard, and we couldn't find anything? Yes, there's older information out there, but in the modern world, the data only goes back so far, and then you hit a blank wall. So I would really urge people in businesses just to keep that succession of information going, so keeping these libraries of information. There's a corporate memory in the food industry that we lose. And I always say, in my opinion, on average, it's about every 3 years you see the same incident come to salmonella in chocolate, tahini, hummus. Everything comes around in a cycle, and it's really worrying to think that we're working in such siloed, competitive industry, but realistically, we need to take a step back and think, what is the global aim? And it's to feed people. Yes, it's to make money and be competitive, but also we've got to realise that we are protecting consumers and nourishing people as well. And there's got to be a step change through organisations with people like Tina and support at FSA and government agencies, but also in some of the larger federations, to let us speak on these type of platforms and hopefully share more information and just keep that memory fresh for longer.
That's a really good point. And if people aren't actually members of professional bodies like the Society of Food Hygiene and Technology or the Institute of Food Science and Technology, go and see their websites, get involved as members. It's a free access to that corporate memory. There's a lot of people like me who are fellows of IFST who've been around a long time. I know that FSA have got a group scheme for IFST, and so there's a lot of learning in there that you can seek guidance from. There's a lot of resources that are already available. And the other people who know a lot are the guys in the law profession. So, Ian, you see things and can give counsel proactively as well as when things are going horribly wrong. I'm sure you'd much rather be counselling your clients proactively about their policies, procedures, and how they kind of have a due diligence framework that allows you to then do your best for them and get best outcomes for them. Is that a fair comment about obligations versus using the counsel as available to them?
Okay, the first thing to remember is that your lawyer is your friend.
Yes, they are.
I'm seeing some smiles. But bear in mind that preparedness for a recall starts the moment you start your own business. And if you can take advice at that stage, you will be in a position to be ready to deal with an incident, because an incident will happen. It might be minor, it might be something you can deal with in 24, 48 hours, or it might be the sort of thing that Jatin and his company were involved with. I'm frequently trying to tell clients and solicitors that instruct me, proactive preparedness is better than trying to deal with it on the hoof. And I know everybody on this panel will probably agree, 4:30 on a Friday before a bank holiday is when these things kick off. And if you've got a system in place already, you will be streets ahead. The other thing that I always find very important from your lawyer working with you and with your consultants, and I would also say working with EHO and with the FSA, is that we are a step back. We can look at things possibly more objectively. I mean, Jill's explained, she's probably there with her white paper and crayons, but really on top of what's going on, trying to manage it there and then. The lawyer, certainly in my experience, takes a step back and says, well, how can we plan going forward? Because inevitably there'll be some sort of legal consequence from this. It may be a regulatory consequence, a prosecution, for example. And what we are trying to do at this stage is help you manage to protect the consumer, because that's actually what we're all there to do. But secondly, for the lawyer to keep an eye on the business to make sure that the business doesn't make a mess that could come back and haunt them if they are taken to court later on. So the lawyer has, in a sense, a dual role. One is to work with everybody to protect consumers, but we also are there to help protect the business as best it can. However, you know about collaboration, you know about cooperation in recalls and incidents. We as lawyers will always tell you, as the business, you have to be upfront. You have to explain what you've done. There's no point hiding it. And you probably in business all know that your lawyer always tells you, no, you can't do that. Lawyer's the worst person you can have. You can't do that. You can't do this. We will in this situation be saying, this is who you need to contact. This is how you need to do it. This is when you need to do it. And this is what you need to say. Because it will in the long term protect the business. And we are there to help you, but also to help others to protect the consumer, but proactive rather than reactive.
And there's a little bit around getting the right insurance cover as well.
Look, I'm not a commercial lawyer, I don't really understand finance, but the other thing at legal could be contractual, commercial, making sure you've got recall insurance, all of those things which, interestingly, even large companies don't often have the correct recall insurance in place. So speak to your commercial advisors and say, well, what's the best way of doing that?
I think you're right, that can catch people out, and it's very unfortunate. But life means sometimes that mistakes do happen. No one's intention, and what we don't want is for anyone to then pay the penalty of it affecting their business when you could have had the right guidance and counsel proactively, the right cover proactively, to make sure that you're protected as individuals as well as actually your business. So the other thing I would add personally is please value the technical expertise that you have in-house. They are not just a bottom line overhead. They are there to give you, I would say that, wouldn't I? But they are there to make sure that all of this advice can be applied in context in your operations. And when a change happens, that change doesn't derail all the good work you've already done. You could implement change well. And there's a lot of people I've seen who've not implemented change at all, and have just gone on not realising that all of their presumptions and hazard analysis was no longer relevant or valid to their current operations. So just as my two penneth. Questions from the audience? I'm sure you've all got lots because you've all been nodding. Anyone got a burning question?
My question is for Tina. We're all following the same similar supply chains, but we don't have visibility of all of the different things other people have already done in large organisations. To what extent are we progressing the use of blockchain so that we can fit together visibility and traceability in supply chains for UK food manufacturing?
Okay, thanks for your question. I missed the very end bit there. So this, like check your supply chain, is a really easy statement to say, but I know it's really not as easy to do. But this is where sharing mass data, I think, is essentially the way forward. As a regulator, we see lots of really good efforts across spectrums of the food chain, different stages of manufacture. But there's lots of effort in some places and lots of pockets elsewhere, and what doesn't seem to really be there is that sharing of data, that one industry level effort. If you look at other sectors like pharmaceuticals, they have a similar approach and issue, but they are probably more grown up about sharing data. So blockchain is one tool, but it has its benefits and limitations. But I think more importantly is data sharing, but that data sharing has to be in a particular language so that it can be interpreted by everybody. So using things like microbiology, for example, some talk in genetics, some talk in MLST. So, and even if you talk genetics don't talk to genetics, and that's true across government. If you consider Animal and Plant Health Agency versus UK Health Security Agency, their own whole genome sequence don't seamlessly talk to each other. What's the benefit of that is knowing the weaknesses of those systems. So I would advocate, there's some really good trade associations out there, there's some really forward-thinking ways to work together across industry and how that looks with the regulator. So even if you're a smaller business that doesn't have that super sexy 20 people in your food safety team, get involved, start listening, start contributing as well, so otherwise you'll get left behind. But this is where the benefits of trade associations, and outside of that, events like this and free membership to accrediting bodies and expert groups can help disseminate the information. So blockchain is a tool, but it also has its limitations. So I think in essence, it's data, sharing data from industry, across industry, to industry, and I completely get that what we as regulators get to see might not be the same. We are also mindful that you've lost a lot of regulatory data since you exit. We know about that. It is in part available on RASF, but what goes on Infosant is not there. But that is something we're working to. We published one data set last December, and this year it's in our business plan priorities to make that available more frequently, hopefully monthly. So that will mean then you'll get to know what we know to a degree. And whilst that's being developed, we are working with Food Industry Liaison Group, providing information out to the trade associations. So I have this mantra: if I'm going to be awake at night, then you're going to be awake with me, because it's a pretty lonely place in the middle of the night. But in all seriousness, that's how we currently work in disseminating those key concerns via the associations. They can share them with their members. So do look at how you can access that information.
Thank you, Tina. That's very helpful. I'd say there's two types of data, isn't there? There's the qualitative data about whether a particular topic or hazards emerging or new information, and then there's the quantitative data about how often and where from and the different channels that it might be coming through. Have we got another question from the floor? Yes, lady at the back.
My question is for FGS Ingredients. In terms of the work you did after the event with more supply chain transparency, more data, more analytical testing, more robust processes, did that support with regaining the trust of your lost customers, or was it more too little too late?
Yeah, to be honest, it did regain a lot of the customers. But where the issue was as well with the customers and in the industry as general was, obviously we had to start using this may contain, because if we were reassessing and we found a known risk, and obviously we had to take that due diligence on it. Customers didn't want us to be using this may contain or show that possible, reason for contamination. So we lost customers because of that reason. The rest of the customers accepted it, understood it, and unfortunately still with us as well. So.
And you have actually gone, as you said earlier, and looked at your supply chains and done the assessments and I suppose increased the level of detail that you've now got that's allowed you to do those precautionary advisory labels. And the thing with deciding whether you're going to use a precautionary advisory label, there is a lot of very good advice out now about how to do that. So it's a potential hazard doesn't mean that it ends up being a risk that needs that warning, okay? It's about likelihood of occurrence, and I think, Jatin, from what you've been saying, is that's the factor that you didn't have before that you've now got, that's allowing you to say, actually, peanut is a potential hazard in mustard, and we've got evidence to confirm there is some likelihood of occurrence, therefore we're justified in putting that on.
And the other thing, we learned a lot from the incident as well. One of the things for me personally, I didn't know that if you're when you're growing or farming raw material, up to 5 years the residue still stays in the soil. So whatever crop you're growing after that, for 5 years, you still see it showing up in the other crops. So to take all that into consideration and plan your obviously supplies like Tina mentioned, and then your specifications, which is what we did and we are currently doing as well.
So a question for Jill, just building on that then. How can your specification questions and procurement programs actually support giving relevant assurance, not just for allergens, but I think it's a good example because it's heterogeneous cross-contamination, it's not homogeneous, it's, one negative test does not mean your batch is okay, and all of those challenges. What's your point of view on that?
For me, I'm quite aligned with the GFSI focus actually on looking at quality culture when it comes to this type of, let's say, issue. as you say, testing, and this is a mantra of mine, testing is a monitor, it's not a control. Just because you test something, it makes no difference to whether that residue is going to be in the other batch or not. You know, the mustard seeds don't know that you've tested them for peanut. They haven't told their mates in the other field. So what you have to do is really dig in with questioning, and you alluded earlier, Rachel, with making sure that you use the right types of questions, that they're clear, they're guiding, but they're open, and you're getting a good degree of information from your suppliers. And it's all about, for me, everybody talks about ESG now, right? But this is crucial for me, especially in the world of agriculture, because you've got pressures of socioeconomic pressures, environmental, weather patterns, things that are forecastable, that people can horizon scan, and you can ask questions built around them and find out how do the different farms treat their staff. Are they, do they use seasonal workers? Are they small, large? When they go to cooperatives, is it a huge tanker loads coming in, or is it a guy with a couple of sacks on a push bike, or is it a mixture? How does that work? So, asking lots of probing questions that really get you in sort of. I always think about when you're at an art gallery, if you go and you stick your nose on the picture, all you can see is the water lily, but you've got to step back and look at it from the other side of the room to see the full picture, and that's kind of what you've got to do here, to put some sort of analogy around it.
And there are some good codes of practice now, aren't there, on allergen cross-contamination management that have been published by Codex Alimentarius. So on codes of practice, Ian, how does it impact a business? What if you don't apply a recognised code of practice? You can't, can you plead oops?
Depends which lawyer you instruct. One of the questions that I often have to ask clients is, you are putting a may contain on it. Why? Oh, well, because. Why? Oh, well, because we've seen it on other products. Yes, but why your product? And you keep, and it's Jill's point about asking the right questions. Why do you think your product may inadvertently contain allergen X? If you can justify that, then you get to the next stage, which is, we probably have to do it, but do we have to do it? And then you get to that sort of risk assessment. And it's probably an awful thing to say, but for food businesses, what they often forget to do is to go back to basics. What's a hazard? What's a risk? What does may contain mean? Why am I saying it? And a lot of it comes down to the science. I'm not a scientist in any way, shape or form, which is why we work as a partnership with consultants, etc. But one case I had not long ago was simply, I asked the person, have you been to the site where your product is made? No, I've never been there. Have you ever sent anybody, an agent or a representative? No, I've never sent anybody there. They went out and they had a look, and they could visually see for themselves where the risk of the cross-contact could occur. So it's a lot of it is, I know it's not always easy, but for the owner, the operator, the director, the person responsible to actually go out and look at it. If you don't follow an appropriate code of practice, now this is an interesting bit because codes of practice aren't law, and in food, not very often are law in the way that they are in health and safety. So it comes down to this. Every decision you take, whether it's in recall, incident, or precautionary allergen labelling, justify, document, and keep the documents. So if Tina rings you up and says, this has happened, you can say, well, yes, but we have thought it through from base level, and this is the conclusion we came to for these reasons. Now, Tina will look at that and she'll go, okay, that's fine, but we still need to do something else. It always reminds me of maths at school. I couldn't do maths to save my life, but one teacher said, put down your workings out, and even if you get the wrong answer, you still get some points. So it's all about thinking and going back to first principles to get to the position as to when making those decisions to either put a PAL or not.
That's really helpful. We're about to wrap up. Tina, I know that the FSA have been doing a lot of work on precautionary advisory labelling, been very involved at the global level, really investing in the science. I believe you've got a call out at the moment for data. Would you perhaps want to use the last few seconds to let people know what that is?
Absolutely. So we get one of the greatest challenges for industry is that trigger. So you've done all of your assessment, and actually where do you consider it needs a label or not, or it needs for safety action or not? You might or might not be aware that we're non-ministerial, we don't have a minister because we're independent to protect consumers, but instead we have a board. So we took a proposal to the board last year, which is actually not that long ago, proposing the use of vital thresholds, EDO1 and EDO5, and their role in standardising and harmonising safety approaches. It was rejected on the basis, I think the thinking is it might deteriorate standards of safety, and on reflection we just don't have the evidence to demonstrate one way or the other. Now we deal with hundreds of incidents every year. You might think you know about them, but we only lead to recall in 5 to 6% of them. 94% of them then don't. But in those, we see some really good use of EDO1, EDO5, other tools in the risk assessment. So we've got out at the moment a call for evidence if you're using these. We're keen to see the good, the bad and the ugly, because we can't get anywhere without any evidence. So in understanding how industry use it, then that's how we'll be able to help you come to some position, potentially, I can't guarantee this, but potentially, but at the very least we need evidence to enable us to go back to the board and ask them to reconsider and help you in at what point does that balance tip to being unsafe or tip to needing a precautionary allergen labelling. So do get in touch if you're keen and happy to share with us how you apply those limits.
Thank you very much, Tina. I mean, we've been asking for that quantitative risk assessment, haven't we, for a long time, and the science is only just about there now. So thank you for that. And I just want to ask the audience to please thank the panel for their very detailed inputs and support today. Thank you, guys.